Yo, what up, guys? Travic here. Today, let's talk 3.27 and let's talk league starters. Today, I'm going to be going over my first and front runner for what I plan on starting in the latest Path of Exile expansion. I'll be going over what I'm going to play, what my plans are, how I'm going to level it, and so forth and so on. So let's just kind of dive into it. Before you see two different characters. You see both a Pathfinder and a Slayer as I tested out two different variations of, and you guessed it, Poisonous Concoction. At first, I thought I was going to play Slayer and transition into something Slayer-based to save myself from re-rolling, but after doing a couple of tests both on Slayer and Pathfinder, I found Pathfinder to be very comfortable in both the campaign and early mapping experience. Now, when I went through the campaign on my Pathfinder and I started getting to maps, my playtime itself wasn't too bad. I was about 5 hours to maps and then about another 45 minutes messing around, doing Atlas progression, starting to do some maps, and kind of overall progressing my character. Now, if you've never seen Poisonous Concoction, I have played this a lot in the past and I have done many videos on it, but let's just kind of take a look at what is going on and what is Poisonous Concoction. Poisonous Concoction is a flask vial throwing skill, which you can see before you, of me throwing an explosive green amount of goo that scales and is based off of my life flask. The better my life flask, the more damage that I do, and you can see that the skill in itself is pretty sweet, and it has overlapping projectiles. It hits everything in front of you, and it clears very well. Now, Poisonous Concoction has two variations. The variation that you just saw, and there's another variation that I don't have in SSF yet that I'm going to go grab on Trade League and show you what's going on. The other variation of Poisonous Concoction is called Poisonous Concoction of Bouncing, and this allows the skill to pretty much jump all over your screen and bounce all around and do all kinds of cool stuff. And you can see as I throw the Poisonous Concoction, it just kind of bounces all over the place. The more projectiles that you have, the more that it bounces and the more that it chains and the more that it hits all over the map. And instead of having that straight line, you have this nice bouncing effect. Now, according to the patch notes, Poisonous Concoction was slightly nerfed. This is not a surprise. You know, we're not going to try to hide the fact of anything like that. Poisonous Concoction in the patch notes was indeed nerfed. Now, if I bring up the patch notes for you guys to take a look at right here, we can see exactly what is going on with Poisonous Concoction. The patch notes say that for Poisonous Concoction, it now has a 22 to 537 to 33 to 806 added chaos damage at gem levels 1 to 20. On the earlier levels, it was 716 down to 537, and on the higher end, it was 1073 down to 806. This reduces the gem level itself by like 2-3 levels, so you're pretty much playing with a level 17 gem instead of a level 20 in the new changes, according to that line. There is another added line of text that says added chaos damage is equal to 4 to 16% of flask recovery amount if charges were consumed from a life flask previous 3 to 11. Now, what this says is that, to me and how I understand it, is that Poisonous Concoction is nerfed in the leveling experience on the earlier ends, but buffed on the higher end. So as long as you maintain a flask with good recovery throughout the campaign and throughout the early and mid and end game, you will have a really strong skill. To kind of simulate this and these changes, when I did my run on my Ranger, which we will tab back over to, and I completed the campaign in 5 hours, what I did was, instead of having precise technique on the entire time, I clicked it and I just, for routing reasons, I had clicked it, but I never had accuracy higher than my life for 90% of the campaign until about Act 9, where I just said the hell with it and fixed all my problems and kind of played with it. But in Act 1, I had precise technique, and then I said, wait a minute, let's just kind of test the damage loss, and I took 40% more attack damage off, which is probably like overkill to how the nerf is going to be, but I just kind of took this off, and I just played with very basic, not crafted flask at all, and I just kind of went about my business. And then later on, I put this on into maps and put these on because you'll have flask and stuff and gear. So not playing with precise technique throughout the campaign was pretty smooth. It was exactly what you would expect out of Poisonous Concoction. Very straightforward and very good. Now, like I had mentioned, I had played Poisonous Concoction many times before in the past. I've played it on Assassin, I've played it on Pathfinder. Poisonous Concoction is a skill that you should be able to get your 2 Void Stones very, very, very easily. You can even push it to get 3 and 4 Void Stones without much trouble at all. Now, I'm going to pull up the POB and we'll kind of look at what is going on and what you guys can expect and how we're going to be handling things. Now, note something very important that I want to go over. This path of building has your ideal kind of steps to it. It has leveling gear if you were to have re-rolled it as a second character. It has an early Poisonous Concoction of bouncing swap to gear. It has an early end game idea, and it has a relatively higher on the end game. The same thing with the trees. You're going to notice that the trees go from Act 1 all the way to the end game, where you have things like Light of Meaning, Storm Shrouds, Lethal Prides, and Natural Instincts. This character, for me, is going to be a league starter in all of the sense of the words. My plan for this character is to get my 2 Void Stones, get it into tier 16 maps, get it to be able to do tier 16 maps comfortably, whether that be Blight, Essence, or Beast farming, and then start farming and saving up currency to pretty much make that reroll into something either Headhunter based, Mage Blood based, Wand based, Bow based, you know, Cast When Stun based, or whatever decision that I decide to make over the next couple of days. The route that I'm going to choose to swap this character to is going to be based on the information that we get from Bloodlines, gem info, other uniques that are going to be leaked throughout the week, and pretty much what's going on over the next couple of days. But my plan overall is to start Poisonous Concoction. I'm working with a good friend of mine, NECREM, who helped put the Path of Building together. He did a lot of the backbone work. He did a lot of the testing, and he's been a person in my play group for quite a while now, and a big shout outs to him for all of the help that he's been helping me with. And like I've mentioned, we've all played Poisonous Concoction in the past, and we all know it's a tried and true staple of everything that's going on. Now, this Path of Building, like I had mentioned, will cover a lot of your bases. Let's just start from the beginning and go over the basics of Path of Building. First and foremost, when you load this Path of Building, the thing that you're going to want to do first is make sure that your item set matches your passive tree set. So if I have a Poison Concoction of Bouncing Swap and then I have an end game tree, there might be some discrepancies somewhere along the line, and you want to just make sure that you have Peacock Bouncing Swap, you have the same tree on, and it's really easy to make these changes in this menu, so that, you know, everything kind of lines up and you're just like, oh my god, dude, my stuff and my skills, because you can see right now our mana reservation's cooked because we're not making the proper swaps all the way across the board, and everything's just kind of like not working. We're going to talk about the Grace and Malevolent Sync, don't worry. So that's first things first. Second thing is, our Path of Building here has all of the steps that you would want in it. It has your Act 1. It'll walk you through your Act 1, or actually you can't see that, my face is in the way. And then it has your Act 2. It has your Act 3. It has your Act 4. And it goes all the way through the acts until about Act 10. Something to note. This was something that happened to me while I was playing, and I want to make sure that you guys don't run into this issue too. If you have Precise Technique on, which I realized that I had clicked it off in Act 10, if you have Precise Technique on, you need to make sure that your accuracy is higher than your life. I had a few friends do test runs of this, and they forgot to keep their accuracy over their life, and they just kept scaling life. You got to make sure that you keep that in mind. That's first and foremost. Second off, this leveling route I've actually used and have been refining over the last couple of days with help from my buddy NECREM. My friend Alice played it, and she gave some pinpoints on where to make some changes. And overall, we think we have the leveling portion of it pretty smooth out. If anything changes between now and League start on this leveling tree, I will update everything in the description down below. Just keep an eye on it, you know, whether you favorite this video or bookmark it or whatever you need to do. Outside of that, let's keep going. We're going to eventually go through the campaign and get to maps. Once you're in maps, you'd like to make the swap to Poisonous Concoction of Bouncing. You can do it early in the campaign. It still feels fine in the campaign, but it feels better in maps. Usually on a league start, to get Poisonous Concoction, you have to do two things. One, you're either going to buy it off trade or you're going to run labs. When I was trying to get it on a previous run through in labs, it took me about 5 hours of running through Merc labs to get it, and I don't ever want to do that again. So my plan for Poisonous Concoction is to literally, with my first couple of chaos, I'm going to be buying Poisonous Concoction off of trade, because I don't want to do I don't want to do labs at all. Nope. So if I pick it up early in the campaign, I pick it up early in the campaign. If I don't pick it up early in the campaign, I pick it up as soon as I get some maps and start making the swap. You can, like I said, do it earlier, but usually it's better to do it inside of maps. Once we make the swaps, we're going to be upgrading and adjusting the tree to pretty much look to be something like this. You will not need this cluster jewel right away. It is just for follow through to give you more damage. Poisonous Concoction of Bouncing deals more damage as it chains, so we have this so that we can chain. We take all the chaining nodes and the projectile mastery because this is a whole lot of damage, and overall everything is pretty straightforward. We're gonna have a little bit of RMR for our skills. We're gonna have a ton of flash charges and flask effects, and everything else is, you know, we're gonna give a little bit of suppression, and ideally our defense layers become a bit of evasion, some suppression, ideally suppression capped and capped resistances in terms of the early campaign. Gearing for the early bouncing swap, and I was going to say Poisonous Concoction of Bouncing, and then I realized it's a mouthful. The early kind of gearing for the Poisonous Concoction of Bouncing swap is pretty straightforward. You're just going to want life and resistances on all of your pieces of gear to cap out your resistances until we start to have that good Pathfinder feel where our flasks are up all the time and we don't really have to worry. You can, even if you can afford it, get some chaos resistance on gear, and you can see all of the basic gear for the early swap is just life and resistances and attributes where you need them. You will need some strength, you will need some int, and it's pretty easy to get those on the pieces of gear that you need. And as far as your flask goes, like we had mentioned a couple of minutes ago, you're going to want to make sure that you have a flask that has the highest amount of increased amount recovered to scale your damage to the moon. Ideally, in a perfect world, you have a nice divine flask or divine life flask with 4,896 with good quality. Eventually, you're going to want to get a 30% quality flask and pretty much do the same thing where you just kind of scale that flask to the absolute moon. For the bouncing swap, the only really early unique that, you know, I've been told is out of this world has been Fury Valve. There's a couple other streamers and people who are talking about playing with Fury Valve. This might be a pain in the butt to get in the first like 12 to 24 hours. But usually by day 2, day 3, this tanks into literally absolutely nothing because it is on the more common side and it should be relatively easy to hit up. This amulet says it modifies the number of projectiles. Instead, it's applied to the number of targets projectiles split towards. So it just kind of gives you a whole lot of extra damage and it bounces all over the place and it's got a little bit of resistance. It's got some attributes and it's overall pretty nice. After you get set up in the early game and you start making some currency and you start making your swaps and you start doing things, we're gonna upgrade our gear a little bit more and we're gonna start getting some bigger uniques. We'll grab Leper's Alms. Usually this is pretty expensive the first couple of days, so you don't need to rush into this. This is gonna be one of those things that like when you get there, you get there. If you don't get it right away, don't stress, don't sweat. You'll get there when you get there. It is an overall very strong shield with shared suffering. Kind of like just helps you with your ailments and all that jazz. Your helmet, same kind of thing. You're gonna need a bunch of mana reservations, so you're gonna slam an essence for just basic mana reservation, and then you can craft on accuracy or hope to hit accuracy because you're gonna need accuracy to make sure that you can still hit the targets, because even though we're throwing a bouncing flask, you still need accuracy. We're gonna be using Dendrobate armor as just a cheap way to get started because it gives us a nice chance to poison. We get increased damage, or poison duration if we have a bunch of int. We get damage if we have a bunch of dex, which we should in theory kind of more than likely have. We are playing on the right side of the tree. We're gonna move on over to Assassin's Gentle Touch. With the assassin rework and poison being very popular, these gloves might be a little expensive. There is a divination card for it. We don't know where the card is yet, but there should be a divination card. They should be relatively easy to farm if you target farm the card. The card will drop relatively often. In the current league, I believe it's on Dunes, and you can get it on Dunes. You can get a cool double pair. But ideally, we want Assassin's Gloves because it's going to put temp chains on everything. It's going to curse all of the enemies around us. It's going to explode all the enemies around us. And it's going to make our map clearing potential absolutely buttery smooth. Our boots, just boots slammed with an essence for strength to cover all of our strength needs. Movement speed, life, resistances. Fury Valve, the exact same thing. An amethyst ring with just resistances and in stats. And then we have Betrayal Sting here, which is a really interesting ring that I didn't know until NECREM told me about it. This ring says it has a chance to inflict an additional poison on the same target when you inflict poison, giving you the ability to add more poisons and more damage to your target, which I didn't know was a thing, is really cool. So you just get bajillions of damage. I don't know how the pricing on this ring is going to be right away. So if it's expensive right away, I'm sorry. Like I said, there's a lot of people this league planning to play poisons. It'll probably be cheaper in days to come, but we'll see what happens overall. A belt of very basic Stygian Vice, resistances in life. A jewel for the Stygian Vice with just strength, elemental resistance, and max life. Overall, the flask are the exact same thing that we talked about. A life flask with as much increased recovery as you can. A silver flask to give us onslaught. A quicksilver flask to give us movement speed. A bismuth flask for resistances. Because we're playing Pathfinder and we have so much effect from flask, we actually get this beautiful thing to pretty much cover and cap our resistances with our flask. We're playing Pathfinder. The whole thing is a flask-based class. It's okay. It'll be fine. Don't worry. You'll have flask up all of the time. You shouldn't have a problem. And if your flask full up, something crazy happened. I don't know. And then your last class, we're just gonna have a bunch of evasion so that we have a nice amount of evasion rating so that we can start having another defensive layer. Overall in the tree, medium cluster jewel early off for follow through, and then some, jewels to give us strength and elemental resistances. Now, early in the POB's life cycle, NECREM was telling me that the build had some strength problems, which we sorted out with gear and jewels. There is a really simple solution to the strength problem if we come to this endgame tree. I thought this was a really interesting idea. I like this taken idea a lot, but it might be very difficult for a lot of players who are, more on the newer side. So let's kind of talk about the solution to strength. And if there's a better one, you guys can let me know in the comments down below. There are jewels in Path of Exile called timeless jewels. And this, for example, is a lethal pride. All of the information on the lethal pride for our case right now is irrelevant. All we need to know is that a lethal pride does the following. On every small notable, it adds a second line of text. So you see here, it adds 2 strength. You see here, it adds 4 strength and 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 2 strength and 2 strength and 4 strength. What's really interesting about this is this one jewel solves pretty much all of our strength problems. So when we get into the early end game and we have no strength because we're short strength for our gear, we can pop this jewel on, irrelevant to what any of the number is and irrelevant to what leader it is. It just gives us a billion strength to solve all of our problems for 2 points. So thought that was a pretty clever solution, and I liked it a lot. So I'm personally going to probably be doing that at some point early on the character's life cycle. These jewels go from very cheap to very expensive, and these jewels on day 1 and day 2, before a lot of people are doing the mechanic that drops them, will make them very expensive. So you don't need it right away. You can cover a lot of your strength with gear, and I've made sure that in the early endgame swap and the early endgame tree, that the strength problem is covered with gear, pretty much mainly on putting a strength essence on our boots and getting some stats in places like jewels and the Stygian Vice. So just, something to keep in mind. You can always also craft strength on your helmet or craft strength on a ring. There are ways to solve the strength using the crafting bench and essences and a little creativity. Now moving on over to our skills, because I don't want to spend a bajillion hours on our gearing, but I will say the end game is kind of cool. You have Storm Shroud for elemental ailment immunity. You have the Light of Meaning for bajillions of chaos damage and Unnatural Instinct. Oh, Unnatural Instinct. Oh my God. Okay, so really cool thing that I wanted to point out before we go over skills. In the Unnatural Instinct wheel here, you're going to see something really interesting. There is a cold node tattooed here. If I remove this node, I'm actually short cold resistance in this variation of the tree. If I tattoo on cold resistance, you see my cold resistance is capped. Unnatural Instinct is a very interesting thing. It grants all of the passives in the radius, or all of the small passives in the radius, or allocated small passives in the radius grant nothing. So if I were to allocate this inside of the radius, it takes away the node. So you can see it 69 cold resistance. Because it's allocated, I unallocate it, it gives me the resistance. Unnatural Instinct says everything that's a small node in this area that's unallocated, you get. So this mana this increased mana, if I look at my mana, I'm 1172. If I take this, I'm 1135, or 1189 to 1135. Unnatural Instinct allows you to get all of these small nodes for free, which is really cool. So that means you can do really interesting things like tattoo these small nodes. How to do this is you have to allocate these nodes tattoo these nodes, for example, cold resistance, and then unallocate them for unnatural instinct. So we can fix problems like small little things like, oh, look, I'm a little short cold resistance. Well, I can allocate this on this node. Boom, problem solved. Moving on over to skills, because I was excited. I wanted to make sure that I got that in. We have all of the skills for all of the early game solutions. There are 2 ways to level this character, 2 really nice ways to level this character early on. You could do a bow variation with caustic arrow, shrapnel ballista, and just kind of like, well, let me change the leveling gear here. With, you know, caustic arrow, volume, mirage archer, which is a whole lot of fun, and shrapnel ballista just blow everything up. Or you can level it as a spectral throw, and spectral throw is sweet. Now the spectral throw here has a bunch of links on it, and this is to show you that depending on the 3 link that you get, you have options. Spectral throw and volley is green green. If you manage to find green green red, you do chance to bleed. Green green blue, you do prismatic burst, and green green green, you can do chance to poison. So you have options, and that's why these options are here. I have personally leveled as Spectral Throw a handful of times in my early practice runs for these characters. I like Spectral Throw a lot. I think it's a really solid skill. It makes the early campaign from level 1 to 12 feel buttery smooth. The thing that you have to know about Spectral Throw and leveling it early is you're going to need a nice 2-handed weapon, ideally a sword or an axe. And then you just make sure that, you know, at level 1, you pick up a sword from the vendor. At level 5, you grab another sword or an axe on the floor. And at level 10, you grab another one, just to keep that level 1 to 12 progression really smooth. Or if you find an essence, just slam it on your gear and call it a good time. Then you have Leap Slam, faster attack for movement. Precision, you absolutely want to pick up and start leveling. Frostblink, you absolutely want to start leveling. Frostblink's really interesting. It has a high int requirement, so you probably want to leave it at level 1 to solve a lot of your solutions. Sniper's Mark allows Spectral Throw to just kind of like do its thing and explode all over the place, which is really nice. Once you hit level 12 and you get to Merveil's Lair, you unlock Spectral Throw. Merveil's Lair, for those of you who don't know, is this Merveil's Cavern right here. As soon as you zone into this area and see this waypoint, all of your skills at level 12 unlock at the vendor in town, and you can go pick up your Poisonous Concoction. Ideally, at this stage, we have triple green, and we do Poisonous Concoction, Volley, and Void Manipulation. Something really interesting to note is Poisonous Concoction is a skill that does not allow you to have a main hand, and you have to make sure that you take your main hand off. That's why you see here in all of the things, we have no main hand. It's kind of nice because you make up for it in so much damage, but you lose the weapon set, but it's okay. It's literally fine because your weapon is your flask. And then we swap over to a shield. So you're going to want to pick up a shield at some point. We use shield charge, faster attacks, momentum, and then you just shield charge Frostblink through the entire campaign, and it is absolutely smooth. As you get to Act 2, you'll pick up things like Herald of Agony. Herald of Agony will give you more chance to poison. It'll give you a little poison crawler that does some damage. You'll pick up Blood Raid, so you get more attack speed and frenzy charges. Make sure you pick up Withering Step as soon as possible, ideally in Act 1, as Withering Step will grant you elusive that gives you phasing, and it'll give you a buff to deal a bajillion more damage to enemies because you inflict wither debuffs. You can actually have in the swap here, or the Poisonous Concoction and Bouncing Swap, Withering Step as early as Merveil. If you have it on for Merveil, you will just deal double, triple damage and blow Merveil up. Same thing with Sniper's Mark. You just essentially Sniper's Mark, Withering Step, Poison Concoction, and Merveil blows up, and that's how you do every boss in the entirety of the campaign. So moving on over, you go to Act 3, you'll pick up Despair. Despair is a really good curse. It gives you negative chaos resistance. You can mess around with this. NECREM really likes Despair. Sometimes I play with Sniper's Mark, but you can pick and choose which one you want to do. I actually, at one of the campaign runs, did Sniper's Mark through the entire campaign run, and one I did Despair the entire run. Eventually you get to the point where you can get like Mark on Hit, and you can have Sniper's Mark, Mark on Hit, which is really nice, or you can auto cast Despair. Either option's really good. Pick one, put it on, have a good time. Also, as you start to get early into Act 3, you'll get things like Plague Bearer, which is a really cool poison buff that you could put around you. And you turn on Plague Bearer, it gets a lot of poison, and it stacks up all of the poison damage that you do. And then you turn Plague Bearer on, and then you run all around, and you can infect everything around you. And it's just this awesome, cool, clear skill that helps you clear everything. And eventually you just kind of like pair it with more AoE, and then it just blows everything up. It's really cool once you play with it. I actually think I have it on this character. I could show you really quick. Let's just kind of load in here and kind of go take a look at it. You can see it's right there on my bar, and we'll go back over to Act 9 into the aqueducts. We'll create a new zone, and I'll show you guys what's going on. When you turn on Plague Bearer, you can see up here, it's incubating and it does not have any poison. But as I get to mobs and I kill them, you can see it starts to stack up a whole lot of poison damage. And the more you level it and the bigger it gets, it'll have more and more. Once I have a ton of poison damage stacked up, we're gonna wait for this guy to go away so you can see what's going on. He'll go away in a second. I can turn it on and you can see this green ring around me. And as you scale this and level it and get it going and get more damage, this ring will instantly kill mobs all around you. And you can just kind of like, you know, stack it up, which you see we have again, and then just kind of like run your way through mobs and you poison everything along the way, and it starts to die and you're throwing your poisonous concoction and then it runs out, and then you hit some more mobs and then it fills back up again, and then you turn it on, and it's just a nice little extra source of damage to go along with everything that you have going on. It's really fun. It's a good time. I did runs with it and runs without it. It's very noticeable to have it and turn it on and play with it. Moving into Acts 4 through 6, nothing really changes. You could pick up Summon Chaos Golem in Act 4 to give you a little bit of extra resistances and damage over time, which is really nice. You'll get Withering Step, which you could put on. And then overall, you're just kind of playing with Precision and Herald of Agony. Now, as you get into the early swaps of things, you're going to pick up your Poisonous Concoction of Bouncing, whether you buy it on trade or farm it yourself. You're going to pair it with Greater Volley, Void Manip, and Greater Multiple Projectiles. And this way, it has a billion chains. It will bounce a billion times all over the screen and pretty much kill everything in front of you. And it just becomes this awesome, which you saw earlier, it bounced a couple of times. These two supports will make it bounce like 100 times. Still Shield Charge, Frostblink, Herald of Agony, Precision, Despair, or you can do Mark on Hit if you could fit it in with Sniper's Mark, Blood Rage, Plague Bearer, Withering Steps, increase area of effect so that that Plague Bearer hits the whole screen, which is going to be really, really, really nice. And then in your offhand, you have choices. If you feel that you're tanking and don't need it, you can turn on Malevolence to gain a whole bunch of damage. If you're like kind of weak and you need a little bit more survivability, you can turn on Grace. Ideally, eventually we will have these both on, so you should probably level them both, but you pick and choose which one of the two that you want. You can't put both on right away. As we get our gear leveled up and we get our tree leveled up and we make our way through the early end game and we pick up some mana reservation nodes and we have a little bit of extra money and we're kind of doing our thing, we'll pick up an Enlighten and we'll be able to fit all of the auras and have no problems at all. Now, when you get off the early Poisonous Concoction swap and you start making your way into the end game, you're going to pick up your 6th link, you're going to fill out your skills, you're going to have your Herald of Agony, your Grace and Malevolence, your Enlighten, so you can fit everything, still your Shield Charge, Blood Rage. Now you're going to have Seal Skin for just removing bleeds with cast and damage taken. Precision, we have to level up the entire time so that we have accuracy, that we can hit everything. And in our gloves, you're going to notice that we have the Plague Bearer Withering Step, increase area of effect. Now there is Val Haste in the gloves, and there is a note on the Val Haste that Val Haste is for the Val side only. You need to jump through a lot of hoops to have Val Haste on all of the time ever, so we're only going to use it for the Val side. You can push this build to have more mana reservation and upgrade the helmet and get more mana reservation and do things on the tree and jump through a lot of hoops, get another Enlighten, an Enlighten 4 and all that stuff, and you can turn haste on all the time. But we are not going to be doing that. You see, we actually just don't have the mana to do that. And we're just going to only use it for the Val side if you choose to want to press another button. It's really cool. It gives you a ton of movement speed and attack speed, so it's kind of fun to play with. And that's really what's going on. Now, the end game variation of this, you see it's going to be a little crazy. Eventually, you're going to get Svalin because you're either going to use Svalin for your Cast Wind Stun build, or you're going to use Svalin for some sort of crazy build, or you're going to want to juice Poisonous Concoction of the Moon. So we're going to prep and play around Svalin. You don't need this. It's just really, really nice. Dendromate still, because we just want to make sure that we can kill things. Athens Gentle Touch, you can eventually get with extra curses and all that fun jazz. Fury Valve, nothing changes. Betrayal Sting, nothing changes. And we eventually would like to get the Tides of Time belt off of Uber Shaper. This is probably going to be really expensive to begin at the beginning of the league, but as the time goes on, it'll come down and down. Ideally, we get it with 3 charges to Utility Flask and 3 charges to Life Flask so that we can maintain that beautiful amount of charges the entire time. Storm Shred, like I mentioned, to have our modifiers to avoid being shocked, or apply to all of our elements. We have a Viridian Jewel here for just a bunch of damage over time. A large cluster jewel here to give us unspeakable gifts, unwavering evil, wicked paw. This is how you know you're moving into the end game. You have explode in multiple places, more chaos damage, skill effect duration. You grab another cluster jewel with follow through, so you just get a whole bunch more damage. A light of meaning, which says that all of the skills in the radius grant increased chaos damage. And then we still do the exact same timeless jewel thing that I had mentioned earlier. Outside of that, I'm not sure I'm going to get fully to this section of the build. It kind of depends on how things are going and how I'm grinding and what's going on and what I need. For me personally, like I had mentioned, I'm going to get the character to a really comfortable state in tier 16s where I can farm either beast or essence or, well, I mean, blight, you need no gear at all, but blight in map, or, to do the league mechanic, because poison concoction of bouncing plus essence gloves is really good for clearing a large amount of mobs. But we'll see what happens over the next couple of days and how things shift. My goal is, I'm going to be starting late because it's Halloween. My goal is to get to maps on Saturday morning, start evaluating what the market looks like, see how I'm doing farming wise, see what my progression looks like and how income's kind of rolling in. I assume asynchronous trade is going to make getting a lot of this gear relatively on the easier side and relatively on the cheaper side, because gear seems to be a race to the bottom, except for the higher end pieces. And then we'll make an informed decision on which direction and which line we want to take with the character, the build, and how we want to reroll. Any decisions that I make about that, I will gladly put out a YouTube video and let you guys know. As far as farming strategies and stuff goes, you'll also get that video and information. Once we get updated Atlas tree information, I'll probably be putting out my standard blight video and what's going on and how I'm going to do blight. And that's really kind of like where I'm at with things. If you have questions about the league starter or my plans for the league starter, feel free to leave them down below. Come stop by the live stream, join the Discord, post in the Discord. The Discord's insanely active. But for now, friends, I'm going to get this video to you guys. And like I said, any updates or any changes, I'll post it below down in the description and let you guys know as soon as I can. But for now, friends, I'll see you all in the next one.